Okay. Hello, my friend. How are you today?
Oh, fabulous. How are you?
I'm good. I'm still a little under the weather, fighting off the sniffles, but we are here today, and my hair is a little bit down. It was not into being tamed this morning, as I often feel. So we are just
But
dealing with
I,
it as
I was going to say,
it
I love it. It's a different look. And I don't think a lot of our viewers know how long your hair is. So
Yes,
it's a
it
nice
is
little sneak
very
peek
long.
into, yeah,
Oh, let me turn off my background blur. It is very, very long, but
yes,
anyway.
I like it. And it,
Yeah.
it offsets my very short hair. So there you go.
Yeah. All right. Well, so today we're continuing our discussion. We were talking a little bit about different diets last episode and kind of what we're doing and the things that we have used in different various forms of our life. And I thought we would continue our discussion today, kind of talking about keto and low carb, high fat. Sometimes people abbreviate that as just low carb. Some people call it LCHF. Um, and let's go from there. Let's jump in. So, what are your thoughts about what is the difference between them, and what do people mean when they say either of those, either technically or colloquially? Like, what do people refer to?
Sure. So I think they both fall under the category of restricting carbohydrates, right?
Mhm.
When we think of food in general, all food can be categorized into three macronutrients: carbohydrates, protein, and fat. So, of those three, two are required for continued health and longevity and basically living, and that is protein and fat. And carbohydrates, there's not a single essential carbohydrate that is necessary. So once we discovered that, then people found that they could actually change their metabolism and the way that their body works and responds if they decrease the one that was not essential, which is carbohydrates. So I think that's how we get the overarching nomenclature of low carb. But what
Mhm.
is low carb different than keto? Because a lot of people get confused, because keto is in fact a low carb diet, but it's maybe a little bit more strict in the sense. So when I'm thinking of
Hold up,
this,
hold up. I have a
yes,
question, Dr. Soleil.
yes,
You said they're not essential. What do you mean by that? Because I heard that glucose was important for the brain, and everyone, when you go into a basic biology class, that's what they teach you is that glucose is like the main constituent building block for energy. How in the world can you say it's not essential?
yes. Oh, great question. Okay, so what I mean by that is if you do not take in a single carbohydrate, your liver will go through something called gluconeogenesis, which is a fancy way or the medical way of saying your liver will make new glucose itself, right? So therefore, it is not
Gluco,
essential.
neogenesis, genesis meaning create, neo meaning new, gluco meaning glucose.
Absolutely. And so we don't have to physically put glucose into our body for us to use it and for our liver to make it. Um, and so, therefore, if you concentrate only on the essentials, which is we have to bring in protein, we have to bring in essential fatty acids or basically fat into our body because we can make up the rest, then that's kind of what these diets are kind of based on, if that makes sense, right? So, if you decrease the amount of carbs that we are consuming, then we can concentrate on everything else that we cannot make ourselves. The interesting part of that is when we take a look at the standard American diet, and by standard, I mean not necessarily in 2024, but maybe even before this, because I think it's gotten worse, is they were averaging about over 300 grams of carbohydrates consumed for a person that is eating a 2,000 calorie diet. Now, a lot of people don't stick to a 2,000 calorie diet. A lot of people are eating more. And now, in the type of environment that we live in, we have so much more access to processed carbohydrates in our foods and our grocery stores, or even people living in grocery store deserts, right? Or these food deserts, and are getting food from highly processed places like gas stations, right? So we now have so much access to more processed carbohydrates that the percentage of carbohydrates in our typical standard diet in 2024 has probably increased, but we don't have a study that I can base those numbers on. When I think low carb, I am jumping moderate carb, which could be less than 200 grams, and I'm going straight to low carb. And in my mind, that's under 100 grams of carbohydrates consumed throughout my day. When I talk to a patient about where those carbohydrates come from, I try to stick to more of the starchy vegetables and not necessarily processed carbs, right? Because if I only have a finite amount of carbohydrates in my grams, like I want you to stick to 100, I'd rather you eat whole based foods as
Mhm.
opposed to a Cinnabon, right?
Yeah.
Like, and like that's just the difference that came to
Yeah.
mind. Um, and we're also concentrating on getting your protein up because a lot of people are not even hitting their minimum protein numbers, and we're making sure that their fats are coming from a really good source of fat, right? Those high omega sixes. Sorry, not omega sixes, omega threes is what I was
Yeah.
thinking of. Omega sixes we get plenty of in our diet naturally. Making sure that those fats are not coming from trans fats, right? And not seed oils, right? There's all those little particulars I could get into, but that's what I'm thinking of low carb. And then keto can be a little different in my mind. Keto's a little less on, a little lower on carbohydrates. And the reason is because we're trying to reach ketosis. And so
Mhm.
instead of our body burning the glucose or the carbohydrates that we have coming in or even making, we want the body to burn ketones. And those are fat storage that the body and the brain really likes to burn out. And so it takes a switch though, because if your body has been burning carbohydrates and sugars and glucose for so long, it takes a little bit to run out of all of its stores and then switch to ketones or ketosis. And that's why, in my mind, the keto diet is a little bit even lower carb, a little bit higher in fat. So you do have that access to burning more of that clean fuel, and but we're still wanting to hit the minimum proteins as well. So what are your thoughts on kind of my basic
Yeah, I completely
rules of
agree.
thumb?
Yeah. So, when I think of LCHF or low carb, that's as we kind of talked about last time, that's what I tend to do.
Mm-hmm.
I tend to like, I don't stick to a specific number. I just, and but I do agree that sometimes we do tell patients, stick to less than 100, etc. I don't have a specific goal in mind. When I do this for me personally, I just think, okay, let's stay away from sugar and flour, and that what that ends up resulting is a what I consider to be a low carb, high fat diet. There was a website, I think it's still around. It was a huge hit back in the, like, I guess late 20 teens. Like, I don't, maybe it's
Yes,
still around. I don't know,
it is.
but
It is, and I still
it
have
is.
my patients go to it. Mm-hmm.
Awesome. It's called dietdoctor.com, and it was run by this guy who's, I think, a Norwegian. Anyway, he's super hot. But anyway, that is not the reason why I went there, but maybe a little bit. But anyway, he runs a great website. He's a physician who espouses the low carb, high fat diet. And that's kind of what I tend to think of when I think of low carb. So basically, it's a whole foods, plant-based, but completely lenient on the protein and completely lenient on the fat, where you're decreasing carbs. And they want you to kind of stay away from like grains and things like that, but they're not like elimination the way I personally am. But so that's what I think of when I think of low carb, high fat. And I agree with you, the same thing in keto. In ketosis, you're trying to burn fat, and the byproduct of that is ketones, which, as Dr. Soleil mentioned, that your brain can use for energy. And so your muscles and things, you're going to be burning triglycerides, which that's basically the shorthand version or the fancy biochem version of your fat stores.
Mm-hmm.
Um, There's a couple little conversions, but that's irrelevant for this discussion. But so basically, when you burn fat, you're going to produce ketones, and your brain really, really, really loves using those ketones as a brain fuel source. And your body can completely subsist on that energy source without any carbs.
Mm-hmm.
The What we're talking about with the machinery is the body tends to default into running on carbs if you have that energy source available, because it's a little bit, quote, easier. And just because it's kind of what we default have around, the body always will try to do the minimum energy source possible and kind of be lazy as an energy preservation mode, because for, millennia, that's what we needed to do when energy was scarce.
Yes.
And so we always default to using the least amount. But if you deprive your body of carbohydrates for a period of time, your body will upregulate the machinery that it takes to burn fat. And so for people who are insulin resistant or tend to get lots of carbs in their diet, it's a really effective way of increasing your calorie burn. But it does require transition while your body's upregulating that machinery. And so sometimes if you're going into ketosis, that can initially cause you to have some feelings of low energy, etc., until that machinery gets built up. And then I think from both of our experience, I'm not currently keto, but I have done it in the past.
Mhm.
You had this like crazy surge of energy, and I was like, like waking up and like wanting to clean my house and shit. And like, I definitely do not want to do that at baseline. But it's once you build up that machinery to burn fat more efficiently, it can be a really, really effective way of utilizing your body's energy store. And we can kind of talk about fuel partitioning, which is another favorite topic of mine. But when you have someone that is primarily burning carbohydrates, it's actually difficult for your body to burn fat. So
Mhm.
even if you are in a quote calorie deficit, it can be difficult for your body to burn fat, even if you have excess fat stores that you're trying to utilize and trying to burn off. If your body is used to burning carbs, it's going to say, oh, I don't have enough energy from like my intake. I don't want to burn my fat that I have on storage because I have I don't have that machinery built up. I'm not used to burning it. I would rather just decrease my energy expenditure. And so your whole body metabolism will actually decrease.
Mhm.
And so that's why it's so hard. It's like not this just mathematic equation of like just calories in, calories out. Your body is actually going to decrease the amount of output that it burns for doing the same activities, because it's going to get smart and conserve. And so say normally if you're going to like vacuum your house, you use, I don't know, 100 calories. But your body's going to become more efficient and stop doing some of the cell turnover, stop doing some of the behind the scenes biochemical reactions. So it says, okay, we're running out of energy. Instead of utilizing my fat stores and burning off that body fat that you want to do, instead it says, okay, I'm going to vacuum the house, but I'm only going to use 80 calories. And so if
Mhm.
you are a science bro and you're like saying, oh, well, vacuuming the house is 100 calories, well, then just, change that by the amount of intake you're taking, you're not going to be successful, because it's not just a straight math equation of calories in, calories out. Your body can actually upregulate and downregulate how much energy it burns doing the same activities.
Mhm.
And that's something that like our science bros always forget, and or maybe don't realize because they've never had to struggle with this and they've never had the excess body weight on their body and tried to burn it off and not been successful.
Right.
Anyway, that was a way long soapbox, which was not your original question. But your original question was between LCHF and keto. And basically the point of keto is to get you into that state of being where your body is burning fat and producing ketones. And the way that you actually find out if you're in ketosis is there's several different measurements. There are pee sticks that you can do to see if you're burning fat and creating ketones. You can actually buy ketone meters, just the same as like people have glucose meters where they stick their fingers. They're a little bit pricey, but those are all ways that you can do that. And everybody is different. Every single person's
Mhm.
body, what dietary requirement it takes to get into ketosis is different for everybody. So a common number that I see advertised is like keto is eating less than 20 carbs per day, and that is often a very good starting point to get you into ketosis and to kind of find out what works for you, or sorry, to get you into ketosis, but then you have to find out what works for you. So like you have to adjust using your carbs up and down to see what you can intake and still stay in that state.
Right.
Um, and that's not what I currently do, but that is a really, really effective way for losing weight if that's what your goal is.
Right. And I think a huge component to this and why sometimes people need to go kind of extreme, like we talked about,
Mhm.
like decreasing the carbs, is because with that, it's going to lower your blood sugar, which then also lowers
Absolutely.
your insulin. And a lot of us are insulin resistant. I know
Totally.
I am, and that's the huge, I think, lock and key mechanism when people are diagnosed with PCOS or prediabetes or insulin resistance. Like those are all in the same field of um, metabolic issues that sometimes cannot break down carbohydrates adequately compared to someone else that's never had a weight issue or never had insulin resistance, right? And
Yeah.
that's why we store fat so well.
Yeah.
I'm storing it for this future issue, that this famine that in 2024 I'm hoping will never come, right?
Yeah.
But my body doesn't know that. It just
Yeah.
knows that, like, oh, insulin is high, like I'm going to store this for later.
Yeah.
And as insulin remains high, we can't ever utilize our stored fat, even
Yeah.
though it's energy and it's stored away for lean times, but we can't get to it unless we bring that insulin level down. So
Yeah.
that is
And the
is
reason for
also
that is
something.
that you mentioned was that lock and key is that if insulin is high, your body fat stores are actually locked away because insulin prevents the door from being unlocked for those fat cells to release their energy to be able to be utilized. So if
Yep.
your insulin is high, you will not burn fat.
Right. It's
So
it's a fat storage hormone. It tells your
yeah,
body, make, put this away, make more fat, make more adipose tissue, make more, it just stuff your fat cells, really, just stuff more in there. And so that's how we, even though we're doing everything right, continue to gain weight and we become more frustrated. And at least I know I did, right? And we were doing everything, and I was burning more calories, and I was going to the gym, and I was exhausted all the time because I had none of these energy stores that I could tap into or utilize, because I was drastically decreasing my carbs, or decreasing this before low carb, decreasing my calorie intake,
yeah,
trying to burn more calories in the gym. And I was just running myself ragged.
yeah.
So
Especially because a lot of the like 100-calorie little packets of snacks and stuff like that, you think, oh, well, it's just 100 calories. That's great. Like I'll use them. And they're all like high carb
they're all
snacks.
carbs. Yeah. Yeah.
And so you end up spiking your insulin and then your body thinks, oh, I am supposed to store energy. I have like all this energy, and so I need to store it. And so it ends up saying, oh, well, I don't have enough calories, I don't have enough energy, but I'm supposed to store my fat. And so it down regulates behind the scenes all of
Hmm.
the metabolic pathways that are happening behind the scenes so that you can still do the output of whatever your brain is telling your body to do in the gym, like run on the treadmill or whatever, um, even while you're decreasing the amount of calories that you're actually burning to do that, because your body's
Hmm.
down regulating the energy that it's utilizing to do all the same activities. And like I've heard a lot of people kind of push back on this mechanism and say, well, look, if you don't have enough energy, of course your body's going to tap into the fat stores. And that is true for someone who is not insulin resistant.
Right.
But that is not true for someone who is insulin resistant, who has a
Hmm.
high insulin um load in their bloodstream. Like that,
Right.
like the two things can be the same. Like there are different types of physiology. And it's just it's asinine for people to dismiss that. Anyway, I know that's not what we're talking about, but
Yeah.
but it's
Um,
passion.
absolutely. Because we know this and we live this, right?
Yeah, yeah,
I think one of the other confusions a lot of people have is that people with maybe pre-diabetes or insulin resistance tend to be pre-type 2 diabetes. We're not talking type 1. We are not talking about putting a 10-year-old newly diagnosed type 1 diabetic on a keto or low carb diet. That is not what we're talking about. We're talking about women in their 30s who have
yeah,
not understood what's happening, right? Like me, diagnosed with PCOS, insulin resistance,
right.
like those kind of things, right? So, kind of two separate thoughts, because I think
Yep,
when a lot of us talk about diabetes and this diabetic epidemic, that we understand that we're talking about type 2 diabetes, or adult onset, or later in life, and we're not talking about insulin dependent, right, type 1
definitely.
diabetics. So
Yeah,
that gets confusing, because the type 1 diabetics, they can go into something called diabetic ketoacidosis, which is not the same as ketosis that we're talking about getting into. But just wanted to
excellent.
put that out there, because
Yep.
there's a lot of confusion, because a lot of
Yeah.
these words sound the same, right?
Even
Um,
though they're totally different mechanisms, totally
yes.
different pathways, but they do have similar sounding names. So great distinction.
Yeah. Another thing I think that I found really helpful is when I was looking at maybe just decreasing carbs in general, is understanding that when you decrease your carb intake, you are telling the insulin to, right? Because the blood sugar is decreasing, your insulin is also becoming more sensitive the longer you do it.
Mhm.
That tells the kidneys to get rid of more electrolytes. And we
Great
can
point.
develop something called keto flu when we're trying to switch over, right? When we're trying to take our body from burning carbs and glucose into burning fat cells and using my excess energy for right for my my energy, my calories that I'm taking less in. Electrolytes can be that magic fix during that time and after, because insulin tells your kidneys to hold on to more electrolytes and more water, and we become more inflamed and things like that, which is why we also see the whoosh in the first week of going low carb, right? Is because now we are literally peeing out a
Yeah.
whole bunch of that inflammation water that we've been holding. It's a lot of water weight.
Yeah.
Listen, I don't care what it is, I just
Yeah,
want it
same.
gone, right?
Exactly. And the fact that my legs are less puffy and, you know,
Yes.
like, everything is
And like
great.
my joints hurt less. Like it's
Yes.
just everything. I'm like, I don't
Yes.
care what it
I
is.
don't
It's just
care.
I don't have to carry it with me. But
Exactly.
if we remember that also with that, we're peeing out a lot of electrolytes. And if we do not replenish them and we do not increase a really good electrolyte intake, it will make us feel worse. And
Sluggish.
that's the last thing we want, right? When we're
Yeah.
going from sugar cravings and like we're going from high carb to low carb. So just know that that's also something once you look into maybe Diet Doctor or watch other YouTube channels about going low carb or keto, increasing electrolytes is
Yeah.
going to be a huge thing.
Excellent point that I forgot to bring up.
Yeah,
Thank
no,
you.
it's good because that's I just know the first time I did it, I didn't know that. And
Yeah.
a lot of this was not taught in our medical
Yeah,
schools, right?
originally.
And we were teaching
Yeah.
ourselves during the time. And I was
Yeah.
talking to you know, other people that had already done this before, and they're like, "Oh, that sounds like you need to increase your salt." And I'm like, "Oh, I didn't know that
What?
was a thing." Like, okay.
Yeah.
Now,
And who in the world tells anyone to increase their salt, you know?
right,
Like,
right.
but it's actually
Um,
the physiology. Like,
yes.
when you
And
decrease
it's
your insulin, your body's going to decrease the salt that you have inside. And so in order to keep up your energy and the way you feel and all of your connections, you need to increase your salt intake, but not
yes.
just also your potassium and your magnesium. And so taking in a good electrolyte supplement or using a good like pink Himalayan salt on your food, et cetera, is really beneficial.
Absolutely. And that's it has to be good salt. I don't like Morton's table salt, right? There's no benefit to Morton's table salt. There's literally nothing in it except for iodine, which all of us now are
You're going to
getting
get plenty.
enough, plenty and plenty of iodine. Um, so yeah, low carb, high fat, maybe a little keto thrown in there. Get your
Yeah.
electrolytes in. Make sure you're hitting your numbers and like not going over some numbers.
Yeah.
Um,
Before we move on, can I ask
yeah.
one question?
Mm.
What about when I hear people going keto and they go through the drive-through at McDonald's and they get a cheeseburger without the bun? Is that technically keto and is that advised?
Oh, so those are two very good questions. So, I'll tell you what I've done. I've totally done it. And is it considered low carb? It is because as long as you don't have the buns and you don't have the fries and stuff like that, right? Now,
Technically, yes. Is it good for
yeah,
you?
it kind of comes down to how strict you want to be and how much you live in the real world and not,
Yeah,
right? Because like
totally.
a lot of us have absolutely no time and it goes, and if you can make that simple change from, oh, instead of getting a Big Mac, I'm going to
Right,
get,
which I would have done.
right, I'm going to get 3 patties with cheese because I'm not lactose intolerant or whatever, and just ask them to hold the bun. I would
Mhm.
much rather you have that, right? Than
And
the
the
buns
whole
and carbs and
real
stuff like
meal.
that,
Yep.
right? Now there's going to be people out there that says, "No, that's dirty keto and that's gross and you can't do drive-through and it's blah blah blah." But
And
it
that
works for a lot of
probably
people.
is true. But
Yeah.
you and I both work a gazillion hours a week, and I don't have time to like go milk some like I was trying to use that analogy about like if you don't have time to like milk the maids or what I don't know what I'm saying, but
But
have a
yeah,
little
time is of the
mindfulness.
essence, right?
Yeah. And if
Yeah.
you don't have time to cook a gourmet meal, it's okay to do every once in a while. But on the whole, try when you can to have whole foods. And there are easy ways to do that. You can buy um prepared grilled chicken usually often in the um, meat and deli section of your grocery it's pre-prepared or it's pre-cooked, I should say. And then you can just toss it in either with some sauce or eat it on whatever you like. Um, those are options to make it be quick, but we all have been in that situation where it's like, okay, but I don't, like I don't have time to go to the grocery. I need something quick right now.
Mhm.
And that, I'm out of my chicken. And so
Yeah.
that those are options that you can do. We don't
Yep.
recommend them on a daily basis, but that is a way to keep away from the excess starches and carbs and all the flour that's in those bread. So,
Absolutely, because I know I got one of my patients, he's a truck driver and he legit eats out 3 meals every single day. So that is his life. And he was going through anyway. And I said, listen, you can still do this. You can still
yeah,
go to Quick Trip and you can still hit up Bucky's and you can still do all of these things. But instead of reaching for A, B, and C, I want you to reach for X, Y, and Z.
yeah,
And then that's the only switch he made.
yeah,
Fantastic, right? Losing weight, getting off medications, feeling great, losing that inflammation. So, we work with what we have and
yeah.
no one's perfect. And as long as we know what we're making a better choice for ourselves, I think that's the only thing that matters, right?
Agree. Totally
So,
agree.
perfect. Well, I feel like that was a good little intro to low carb, high fat versus keto. We're going to keep this going. So, the next couple episodes, we're going to be talking about other really popular diets that you might have heard of, like paleo and Mediterranean and different changes. But always leave in the comments maybe different diets you want to explore a little bit more, or questions you might have, or if we confused you even more, just let us know. So, otherwise, we'll see you guys later.